slowly force their way forward, house by house.
Hey, Manus, what do they got to do? Put out a sign? Get down!
The government forces ever get the Viet Cong out of the town now that they're here.
Bể tắm thằng đó không? Trong bể tắm thằng đâu biết tên về ba thằng không?
Mark. 5 seconds.
At about 10 o'clock on an unusually peaceful morning in Saigon, the 35th Battalion Vietnamese Rangers, said to be the best troops in the South Vietnamese Army, start cordoning off a square mile of District 5 on the edge of Cho Lon. Sniper fire can be heard in the area. Frightened residents start moving out and are stopped, searched and questioned, sometimes not too gently. After a bit, the Rangers move up the street into a position on a street corner. The locals say the Viet Cong moved into the area, a maze of narrow streets and alleyways, the night before, and are holed up in a new block of flats. The situation begins to get tense. At about 11 o'clock, the first heavy firing starts. At 11:30, the Rangers are ordered to move back. All they were doing is to risk shooting their own men on the other side of the cordon. Shortly afterwards, reinforcements arrive, including a special heavy weapons unit of American military police, formed because of the present emergency. Some of them have never seen action before. By now, the whole area is cordoned off, and like so many beaters driving grouse to the butts, the Rangers start to sweep down to the blocking force, which includes the Americans. But the sweep seems to peter out, and the Viet Cong refuse to be driven. Instead, in a tactic they've used repeatedly in Saigon in the past fortnight, the Viet Cong start a fire which the wind will soon spread, hoping presumably to slip away in the resulting confusion. Half an hour later, the place is like an inferno, and the luckless inhabitants who were crouching on the floor of their houses while the bullets were flying over their heads start to run for safety. On the other side of the street, only too aware of what can happen, householders use every means to counteract the flying sparks.
Jerry, all the way down, all the way down.
And so Saigon burns. Already half the city, a great part of the city, has been destroyed just like this by the Viet Cong setting fire to wooden buildings. The fire spreads, the people leave, and in no time at all, that area is charred and ruined and destroyed. I asked an American officer how long he thought it would take to winkle the VC, the Viet Cong, out of areas like this where the houses are crammed close together and where the alleys are very narrow. He said it'll take months if we can ever get them out. And that is the problem in Saigon. Can the government forces ever get the Viet Cong out of the town now that they're here?
Biết tên bể tắm thằng đó không? Trong bể tắm thằng này đâu biết tên về ba thằng không? Cứ nhắc lạ không?
Nhập lại cái tiền thành ra chỗ này thằng này về nhập ở đâu đi? Ở đâu xuất phát? Còn tôi ở trên kia, tôi ở trên Tây Ninh hả? Đưa đây lên. Sao? Tất kìa rồi. Không có bị đâu khác.
This is a convoy of Vietnamese Marines moving up the Perfume River in the middle of Huế on its way up to try and establish a beachhead on the north of the area which contains the citadel, where 400 or 500 Viet Cong are believed to be still holed out, in fact are holed out, have been shooting back. It's been heavy mortaring just before the convoy set off. Heavy firing from the convoy as we make our way up the river. This particular LST is carrying a large amount of ammunition on it. We hope we don't get hit in the process. The landing stage on the north side of the Perfume River has become a major bridgehead for the Battle of Huế. The scene begins to resemble Europe in World War II. As in France, Belgium and Germany, this is street fighting in the nasty classical manner. Most of the time, you never see the man who's shooting at you. The United States Marines don't seem to be trained in street fighting. Most of them are green troops. Many have only been in Vietnam for a few weeks or months.
They just had some real situations for the line. Hey, Manus, what do they got to do? Put out a sign? What do they got to do? Put out a sign? Get down.
They are courageous, but they lack cunning. And because they lack cunning, and street fighting is what it is, they're taking heavy casualties in Huế. Bravo Company, which started off with more than 130 men, is now down to 90. They have only one officer, one master sergeant, and one sergeant left.
Who's it? Was you the one hitting the arm? Yeah. How about you get hit?
Ahead, a gateway, shattered, leads to the Imperial Palace, once as peaceful as Windsor. The Marines complain that they're taking heavy casualties because they're not blasting the old city indiscriminately. They could completely flatten the citadel, where about 700 North Vietnamese army troops are said to have their headquarters.
Hey, where's the gun team at?
So far, they've held back in order to spare what is culturally the most important city in Vietnam. The Allies face the same problem at Monte Cassino. How long will the Vietnamese and the Americans hold off here, with casualties steadily mounting? And as the Marines slowly force their way forward, house by house, they've been averaging 1 block a day so far, the refugees come creeping out, still trembling. In the street, a dead North Vietnamese soldier lies face down. Excited Marines go up to inspect the body and capture the enemy's weapon. The body is moved by pulling it with a wire in case it's booby-trapped. Yesterday, Bravo Company claimed 25 enemy dead. Its own losses were 3 dead and 8 or 9 wounded. The kill ratio, as the Americans say, is heavily in their favor. Yet, the cost, in what many of themselves say is not only a bloody but a futile war, is mounting all the time. There's no joy in Huế for Bravo Company, nor anyone else, for that matter. Camp Carroll stands almost exactly midway between the sea and the Laos border, 7 or 8 miles south of the demilitarized zone. From this commanding central position, known as Artillery Hill, the American Army's 175s, which have a range of 20 miles, can pick off any target in the whole DMZ area, as well as shooting deep into North Vietnam. But the main mission of the 16 175s is to lay down a protective screen of fire around Khe Sanh, where the Americans have been expecting a major attack for weeks now. In the past 15 months, these super long toms, the longest range guns in the American arsenal, have fired 150,000 rounds, most of them into the hills round Khe Sanh. Soon after we reached Camp Carroll, North Vietnamese troops launched a daytime assault on the Khe Sanh perimeter. Within minutes, the 175s were in action. The barrels of the 175s have to be changed after firing 300 rounds. Each barrel costs $14,000, or the price of a new Ferrari, as one lieutenant said. The big guns are controlled from a nearby underground bunker, the FDC Fire Direction Center. 2 computers are used, one in the battalion FDC, another in the battery FDC, to avoid mistakes in hitting the target. This is vital when the 175s are firing, as they do, only 400 yards at times from the American positions round Khe Sanh. Immediately after the 175s had fired, Camp Carroll itself came under rocket and artillery fire from North Vietnamese positions. About 60 rounds landed in the camp, wounding 12 men. The target, of course, were the 175s. Colonel William Dick commands the 4,000 Marines based on Camp Carroll. One of their main jobs is to defend the 175s. It's been said that if there was to be an attack on Khe Sanh and the enemy was going to try, the North Vietnamese were going to try and overrun Khe Sanh, that first of all they'd have to knock out Camp Carroll because this is the artillery screen for the whole area. Do you agree with that?
Well, I think I can safely say it would be a distinct advantage for them to knock it out if they were trying to go into Khe Sanh, particularly during bad weather. During good weather, we could rely to a considerable extent on our air. But during weather which would preclude air... Like this, to a degree. There might be some air used, but in the event that there was no or limited air used, we would have to rely almost altogether on that particular.
The Americans at Camp Carroll are wondering just how bad the nights are going to be up here near the DMZ. But they're not going to sit here indefinitely and take whatever the North Vietnamese can throw at them. When the weather clears, Colonel Dick says, the Marines will move out and will go on the offensive. That could change the situation. But until then, the guns will stay trained on Khe Sanh.
The only bridge across the Perfume River from the south bank of Huế to the north bank is by way of these flimsy pontoons. In the past few days, thousands of refugees have flocked across it, escaping from the furious battle which has turned the ancient imperial capital of Vietnam into the shattered shell of a once proud and graceful city. The city, its inner citadel, and its university are at the heart of the Vietnamese tradition, and they harbor strongly nationalist feelings. Because of this, Huế was the ideal place for the communists to make what was in essence a political move when, at the end of January, 2 regular units of North Vietnamese infantry infiltrated the city and captured the citadel. How much support they received from the population is impossible to estimate. The price of that support has been the almost total destruction of the city and the deaths of nearly 4,000 civilians.
Here at the Imperial Palace, the lily ponds are full of debris, the trees have been smashed, the gardens full of shell holes, and the courtyard here, a litter of mortar fragments, stones, bricks, all thrown all over the place. But the palace could be in worse shape. It could have been more heavily damaged, and one of the reasons for this is that the Americans and the South Vietnamese deliberately restrained from throwing everything at it as they could have done, but at a price. The cost of the Americans, 119 dead and nearly 1,000 wounded. The cost of the South Vietnamese, about 400, over 400 killed and something like 2,000 wounded.
The palace survived, but many humbler houses didn't. Without a roof to keep off the rain, hundreds of homeless continue to cross the Perfume River in search of refuge on the south bank. It is the last journey for some. For others, like this woman, wounded and perhaps the only survivor of her family, life itself must seem to have come to an end. When the
French were here, they used to call the road that runs from Huế northwards towards Hanoi the street without joy. Well, the city of Huế itself has now become a city without joy. Today is a day of national remembrance throughout the whole of South Vietnam to commemorate the thousands of South Vietnamese who were killed in the month-long Tet offensive launched by the Viet Cong at the end of January. Today, too, President Thieu announced that he was going to try and raise something like £20 million to give aid to the refugees and to repair the damage caused by the offensive. And as part of his new austerity campaign, he announced that all nightclubs would be closed until peace is declared. I asked President Thieu about the appeal he is launching.
To help Vietnamese people for money and medicine or any construction material, all of that.
How desperately?
Even used clothing for it.
How desperately do you need this?
How what?
How desperately, how badly do you need this?
I believe we need it. We need it about 5. We have now 700,000 refugees, and we need about more than 5 billion of piastres to rebuild the nation.
That's about £20 million. Thank you very much, Mr. President. But more urgently even than refugee funds, President Thieu needs more soldiers and more weapons. He's known to be anxious to call up another 120,000 Vietnamese, provided he can get enough American aid to equip them. President Thieu is convinced of one thing, that the communists are going to go all out this year, an American presidential election year, to win the war in Vietnam. He and his Vice President, Marshal Key, believe that the enemy will make Saigon, the heart of the body as he calls it, their prime target, although they will probably launch attacks in the DMZ and in the Central Highlands as well. His program from now to May will almost certainly be to try and win more public support than his government at present enjoys, while at the same time pressing the Americans for more troops, more determination, and more guns. 1968, or the Year of the Monkey as it's called here, is going to be a decisive one in the Vietnam War. The outcome, he feels, will shape the future of the whole of Southeast Asia. It will also decide his fate and that of the long-suffering Vietnamese people.
For years now, the Viet Cong have been strong in the Delta. It's where they've always raised taxes, food, and recruits. And recently they've even been enrolling boys of 14 and 15. But the Americans say that since the Tet offensive, Viet Cong tactics have become much more aggressive. They fire rockets at the river patrol boats with frequency and often deadly accuracy. In one 4-day period last week, 3 of these fiberglass boats were hit and their crews wounded. The Americans thought they'd succeeded in keeping at least the main waterways of the Delta clear of Viet Cong. But now they find that they're not safe even there. They've been attacked several times in the past few weeks by Viet Cong rocket teams operating from the banks of this island in the middle of the main channel. Last Sunday, the river patrol boat headquarters at Can Tho in the Delta decided to launch a retaliatory strike against the island. First of all, the force of fast patrol boats and armored landing craft sailed along the banks of the island, calling on the local population to move out of the area. A psychological warfare team broadcast a message in Vietnamese warning that the strike would begin in half an hour.
Đến đồn quốc gia Việt Nam, đồng bào lưu ý, đến đây, đến đồn quốc gia Việt Nam.
After the broadcast came the bullets. The bombardment lasted a full hour.
goddamn area. Like you guys were gunners.
One machine gunner was slightly wounded by a bullet splinter. Otherwise, there were no American casualties. But it's doubtful if the Viet Cong had many more. But who will ever know? The Americans will not land on the island. Unless an agent brings in a report, the net result of all that flying lead will remain a question mark. And at least one American officer on the operation thought it was futile. Khe Sanh is utterly dependent on the big planes getting through despite weather or ground fire. New radar techniques not only enable the Hercules to drop with almost faultless accuracy, but even if the ground fire hots up, and it almost certainly will, the Air Force claims it will still get the supplies in. And it's been carrying out tests with radar-directed, delayed parachute drops from as high as 10,000 feet. So far, only 3 drops out of more than 100 have fallen into enemy hands, and they were destroyed on the ground by fighters. This compares with the French record at Điện Biên Phủ, when 60% of all drops were lost to the communists. This is a load of 105mm howitzer shell fuses for Khe Sanh. They're going to be dropped on the dropping zone just beyond the runway. It measures only about 300 yards by 300, and it's outside the perimeter of the Marine camp. This means that in the event of a full-scale attack by the communists against Khe Sanh, they would probably overrun the dropping zone very quickly. In that case, any further supply drops would have to be made on the camp itself or on the runway. But the United States Air Force insists that it will be able to keep dropping supplies to Khe Sanh quicker than the defenders can pick them up. 2 hours after leaving Bin Hoa, the C-130 begins its final run to the drop zone at Khe Sanh.
Pilot load master, slow down check complete. Pilot load master, 1 minute check complete, the load is hot. Ready. He was late on that mark. Okay, get your 20 VFR. I'll give you the VFR one. Ready, mark. 5 seconds. Ready, green light. Load's moving. Load's clear. Red light's on, anti-collision.
The drop was on target, the 4th in a row for this crew. And as the Marines get ready to drag the bundles back to their camp, quite possibly under enemy fire, we turn away steeply to avoid ground fire and head back to base. And so another few tons of ammunition land safely on Khe Sanh. And they need all the ammunition they can get since their ammunition dump was blown up by the communists. They face pretty formidable odds down there. They're almost entirely surrounded. The North Vietnamese have rockets and mortars zeroed right in on the camp. They have trenches dug to within a few hundred yards of the perimeter, and they're even said to have tunnels dug under the camp itself. Also, it's reliably reported that the North Vietnamese have 3 Beagle bombers stationed north of the border, which could attack Khe Sanh with napalm. If the North Vietnamese wanted to take Khe Sanh and make it a second Dien Bien Phu, there are very few Americans here in Vietnam who believe they couldn't do it.